Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It is good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. Congress is inching closer to passing a third round of pandemic relief for the country. The House is moving this evening to advance the $1.9 trillion plan, setting the bill up for a final vote as early as Wednesday morning. Between income-capped stimulus checks and an increased child tax credit, most of the relief in this bill goes to low- and middle-income households. According to the Tax Policy Center, nearly 70% of benefits go to those making less than $91,000 a year, and the bottom fifth of the country would see a 20% increase in their after-tax income. Here's how House Speaker Nancy Pelosi characterized the bill earlier.
I'm so excited, I just can't hide it. In the 33 years that I have been in Congress and up until now, the Affordable Care Act has been the most consequential legislation that I have been a part of. This is definitely on a par with that, if not to exceed it in terms of its impact on many more poor people in our country.
As he awaits the bill's passage, President Biden visited a Washington, D.C. hardware store to talk with small business owners who got paycheck protection loans from the government.
One of the reasons why I changed the rule for 20 days to make sure only employers who had 20 or fewer employees could qualify for PPE. And the reason for that was 400,000 small businesses went out of business. They got in line, but they couldn't get the help. And we found out that an awful lot of that went to bigger businesses that, in fact, weren't supposed to qualify for this.
Meanwhile, President Biden's defense secretary is expected to approve a plan to extend the National Guard's deployment at the U.S. Capitol for about another 2 months. Their deployment was set to end Friday after being sent to respond to the January 6th riot. Coming up, I'll speak to our Catherine Herridge, who has new video of pipe bombs placed ahead of the insurrection. But first, Caitlin Huey-Burns and Eugene Scott join me now. Caitlin is CBSN's Washington reporter, and Eugene is a political reporter for The Washington Post and host of the podcast, The Next 4 Years. Welcome. It's good to have you both. Caitlin, let me start with you. How long before the COVID relief bill is signed into law and the aid actually starts to kick in?
Hi, Elaine. Well, the House is supposed to vote on the measure tomorrow. This comes after the Senate passed it, and there were changes in the House versus the Senate version, so that's why the House has to vote on it again, and we don't expect them to make any additional changes. So once the House passes the bill, then it goes to Biden's desk for a signature, and there is an imperative for him to sign it as soon as possible, because remember, those unemployment benefits run out for people around mid-March, and so there is a tight timeline here in terms of getting people relief. In the Senate version of the bill, they extend unemployment benefits up to $300 per week. That's different from the House version of $400 per week, but the Senate version also extends them through September. So that's critical for people. I think the biggest question that people have is, when are you going to get that stimulus check? You mentioned the various brackets for who is going to receive that money, and that's why all eyes are waiting to see when the president will sign it. The last iteration of stimulus checks, it took about a week or two for the IRS to be able to start delivering those checks. So you can expect a similar type of timeline. So, middle to late March is when people could be getting that $1,400 check, big relief for people who need it at this time, all depending on when the president signs it. We know he's giving an address on Thursday, so we can anticipate that this will likely be wrapped up before then.
Yeah, we know that those checks cannot come soon enough for so many Americans. Eugene, let me ask you, some of this aid is set to expire in a year under this bill. And I want to play a clip from our congressional correspondent, Chris Van Cleve, asking House Democratic leadership about the potential looming cliff. Let's listen to that.
As you talk about the child tax credit,
Yes.
that lasts for a year. So you present a situation where you're creating a fiscal cliff if it's not extended. So all these families are talking about lifting above the poverty scale could get knocked right back down.
Well, one thing that you should know about the tax code getting something out of the code is oftentimes harder than getting something in the code. So I've already had some thoughts about how we're going to expand it and make it permanent.
So, you know, Eugene, it's really interesting to hear. So how are Democrats actually trying to approach this right now?
Well, it was pretty clear from the beginning of talks about introducing, or should I say expanding this tax credit, that Democrats were going to try to find a way to keep it in the bill or make it more permanent, because there was significant pressure from people in the base who were saying we need more relief than something that lasts for 12 months. And so while plans have not been made clear or, you know, at least made public, what the Democrats will try to argue to keep this tax credit in the bill and make it permanent and maybe even expand it even further, there definitely is going to be an incentive and a desire to keep it in place opposed to letting it expire, because this is one of the things that the left wants to run on heading into midterms. Not only that they expanded the child tax credit, but that no Republicans in the House voted for it. And so to be able to do that convincingly, you would have to move it forward and keep it in place.
And Eugene, it's starting to look like the next legislative push from the White House will be infrastructure. What do they want to accomplish? How will it be paid for? And how do they think they'll actually get there? Because you had no Republicans backing this latest round of COVID relief.
Well, that's the question that remains on the table, or at least many of the questions, because infrastructure is something that many Republicans led us to believe that they were going to be in support of during the Trump administration. But now that there's a new president in the White House, there doesn't seem to be as much buy-in from those on the right. We know that there are bridges and roads that have not seen repairs in years that many Democrats have argued are desperately in need of support and funding if things are going to improve in various communities. And so Democrats are finally going to try to get around to making sure that they find funding, very often perhaps looking at ways they could possibly increase taxes of those who have lots of funds and resources to see if they can pay for some of these projects that benefit everyone as a whole. Most of their ideas and desires have not yet been made public, but this is something that we're paying a lot of attention to because this is a topic that's been on the table for a while, and there hasn't been much forward movement. And as we get closer to the first weeks out of the first 100 days, there's going to be a lot of pressure and desire to see something come to fruition.
Well, Caitlin, let's turn to the topic of immigration. A record 3,200 unaccompanied migrant children were stuck in Border Patrol custody Monday, nearly half of them being held beyond the 3-day legal limit. Now, the White House has said they were expecting this influx of minors, but Caitlin, what are they actually doing about it?
That's right. And this is a significant number. A former DHS official had told CBS News that this is the highest number in the agency's history, and they're usually kept in the facilities for just 3 days and then transferred to a more hospitable accommodation. And so you have these children really stuck in these centers that are not designed for children. And so the conditions are harsh, and it's raising humanitarian concerns. There is also this question of what this means in terms of the Biden policy. There's no question that Biden's approach to immigration is drastically different from his predecessor. He's made that clear. And so there is this question of this increase being related to this administration's stance in terms of immigration and letting people come to the border. The administration today, Jen Psaki, the press secretary for the White House, was asked about it today. She was asked, is this a crisis? And she said that they wouldn't go that far to give labels to anything. They say that their message continues to be that this is not the time to come. Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas was at the border over the weekend, and that's also been a message that he is putting forth. But this is posing a challenge to the Biden administration when it comes to immigration policy.
It's something we're certainly continuing to watch. Eugene, I want to ask about some of your reporting. After Republican objections, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer filed to advance President Biden's nomination for Interior Secretary, Congresswoman Deb Haaland. And you've been reporting on that GOP pushback and how it lines up with public opinion. What did you learn?
Well, we learned that Republicans are largely out of step with the American public as a whole when it comes to environmental issues. During Haaland's confirmation hearings, GOP leaders constantly tried to portray her as too radical and too extreme to lead this department, the Interior Department. But when you look at polling and look at where Americans stand on issues like climate change and the Green New Deal, there's actually broad support for these ideas and policies, and it actually means that Republican lawmakers are in the minority, and their ideas on this topic are far more out of the mainstream than this nominee, who was praised while in her first term in the House for having ideas and values that made her highly bipartisan and winning the support of people on both sides of the aisle. And so it's not that much of a surprise to see Democratic leaders moving forward with trying to get her in position to lead the department and to make history also. She would be the first Native American cabinet member in history.
All right, before I let both of you go, Caitlin, I have to ask you about this story that came up during the White House briefing, and it's the Biden family dogs, Major and Champ, being moved back to Delaware and out of the White House. You know, it's interesting because people are following this story, and I'm wondering, what is it that we learned today? What can you tell us about this?
Well, Elaine, Major Biden has had a rough transition to this White House, apparently. Jen Psaki today confirmed that there was an incident. Yeah, thank you for bearing with my puns there. Jen Psaki confirmed that there was an incident. She says that the dog was, quote, surprised by an unfamiliar person and reacted in a way that resulted in a minor injury to that individual. So Major Biden is now being sent back home to Delaware for a little bit of time. They say that that was planned as Dr. Jill Biden, when she has planned trips, that they say that they are going to send the dogs back to Delaware. But this was confirmed by the White House today that there was this incident involving the first dogs. Is that what we call them? The first dogs? One of them, at least. I think so.
And Caitlin, it was minor injuries, though, right? Is that what we understand as well? I believe, is that what Jen Psaki said, that with respect to this incident, the nature of the bite, I think she used the term minor to describe it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. That's correct. She said, quote, it was a minor injury. And we're not sure who exactly sustained that injury, and we have not heard from that person. But they did confirm today that there was a biting incident.
Okay, for anyone who was wondering, I just wanted to make sure we clarify that. All right, Caitlin, Huey-Burns, and Eugene Scott, we cover it all here at Red and Blue. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.